Welcome back to more behind the scenes of the Waltons. Today, I'm going to be talking about the vehicles on the Waltons. If you're enjoying these videos, please do like and subscribe and leave any comments below. So, the vehicles, of course, we had the old green truck that Daddy had. Originally, that was the only vehicle that we had for the whole family, which was pretty typical in that time period, I'm sure. That truck didn't always run. Most of the time it did, but sometimes they were trying to get a take and it just would not start. So they'd finally put a rope around the front bumper, and a number of big, strong crew guys would pull the vehicle into the shot or out of the shot. Sometimes they would also do that intentionally if the point that the truck needed to land when it came into a scene was very precise because of where the camera was. So they'd often put sandbags if we needed to hit a mark, and you would get close to that, and then when you hit the sandbag, you knew you were there and stop. Sometimes you couldn't quite do that, so sometimes they would use the pulling of the vehicle into the shot so they could be precise about the mark. And sometimes it was just because the thing wouldn't run. We had that happen one time. We were doing the Hollywood Christmas parade, and all of the cast was riding in the truck. Partway through the parade, the truck stalled and wouldn't go, and there we were in the middle of the parade with this vehicle that wouldn't move. Well, all of the cast hopped off the vehicle and jumped onto some sort of float that was in front of us or behind us or something, and we rode the rest of the parade on this other float and just waved at the crowd. I'm sure people were very confused. Who are these people and what are they doing on this other float? After a while, we also acquired John Boy's little coupe. I don't think I ever drove John Boy's car, and then of course John Boy would drive people around as needed, take them places, pick them up, things like that. When I married Curt, Curt had his big blue hospital van, so I frequently drove that, which was big and heavy and very hard to steer. Most of those vehicles did have very difficult steering. Of course, Jim Bob built his own car, theoretically, and later opened a garage and took care of everybody else's vehicles in town. Jim Bob also had a motorcycle at one point, which he had to learn how to ride. Ike Godsey had his wonderful motorcycle with the sidecar, and I always loved seeing Corabeth riding along in the sidecar. So there were actually quite a few vehicles, and then we would have guest stars who would have vehicles. Every once in a while, there'd be some wonderful old car. So we were a bit of a showcase at times for them. One of the things with scenes with the vehicles is sometimes it was real and sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes if you just saw the vehicle driving down the road and the camera was outside of the vehicle, then typically it was us driving it. When they were shooting scenes where you were seeing inside the vehicle and John and Olivia are talking, or somebody else is having a conversation, with the driver or with the passenger, those were typically done with what we call process shots. At that point in time, the way it was done was they would, let's say we're talking about the truck, so they would bring the truck onto the soundstage. They would mount a camera or have a camera at the front of the truck, and then they would have a screen behind the truck, and they would run video, film footage of the road. And that was what you would see in the shot. So all the dialogue would happen. They could control the sound and of course the shot. They would have lights set up around it, and there would typically be someone who would have like a branch or something in front of one of the lights, and at points as they were driving down the road, they'd swipe this tree branch in front of the light so that it would look like shadows from trees going by. And they would also have levers, like a big plank set up under the vehicle so that they could lever that and show and have movement of the vehicle. So that movement was the crew creating that through a fulcrum sort of a system. If you could see what was happening with the screen, then, usually the roads were pretty straight ahead, so you weren't trying to do a lot of turning. So you would just, if you were theoretically driving the vehicle, you would simply kind of have minimum amount of hand motion on the steering wheel. I remember one particularly funny blooper that was shot during one of the process driving scenes. Ralph is driving the truck and Michael is in the passenger seat, and at one point, they're talking, the camera pulls back and Michael is running along, pretending to run along beside the truck. So when they pulled back, you could see her outside the truck as he's talking to her. So another example of a blooper and some of the silly, fun things that we would do at times. So those were pretty typical anytime there was much dialogue going on inside the vehicle. It was just easier to control and easier to get the shots. I think the only person who didn't drive, well, Grandma you never saw drive, but Ellen Corby did drive. Will Gear did not drive at that point in his life. So there are times where you see the outside of the vehicle, but you don't really see who's driving because it's night. I would guarantee that wasn't Will. They would have had his stand-in or somebody doing that driving and just, have Will's coat or whatever on, and the camera would be such that you didn't really see who was inside the vehicle because he didn't drive. When you were inside the vehicle and you saw him and Grandma talking, that would have been a process shot. And it was pretty dark around, so you didn't have to worry too much about what you were seeing outside because it was dark enough that you wouldn't have been seeing anything. So that's a little bit of what went on with the vehicles. They were actually old vehicles, so depending on how well they were able to maintain them, determined how well they ran. But we certainly had a lot of fun with them and a lot of challenges with them, but they certainly also added a wonderful, realistic quality to the time period and the era, and they were just wonderful to have as a part of the show to be able to access all those actual old vehicles. So thank you for joining me for another update of behind the scenes of the Waltons, and I will see you next time.